This will be a day long remembered. Now I am the master.
Welcome to another episode of Legends and Theories, and welcome to my review of 2012's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This is the show from Nickelodeon, and yeah, honestly, I cannot believe that this show is from Nickelodeon, and if you don't know what I mean, then you've clearly not watched the show because it is so unlike Nickelodeon. I am actually planning on making a video titled Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2012 is an anti-Nickelodeon show because, for the short of it, Nickelodeon shows are basically, just kind of like goofy shows that really don't have any plot or substance. But this is very plot driven, a lot of substance, and is very dark. Like, I'd honestly believe that this was on Cartoon Network over Nickelodeon because, with the exception of the only one that I know of is Avatar The Last Airbender, which personally I am not interested in, but I heard that is also really mature. Everything else on Nickelodeon is basically like SpongeBob, where it is very, just silly and stuff, but that's all going to be for a different video. Going into this show is incredible. It is very well done. It does have some flaws, but that's mainly when they leave New York City and the threats of Shredder for the most part, but also the Krang behind. And I think that's definitely when the show is at its weakest, when they're outside of New York. But going into it, this show, it was truly incredible. It began very solidly with setting up the Krang as a pretty good mystery and having the Shredder sort of there in the background beginning his plans. And the show was very solid until it got to, honestly, one of the best points of it, which is really early on, and that is the Shredder's first full appearance where he just goes completely off on the turtles. Like, the fight was not even fair, and it just solidified Shredder as a threat and made him a very deadly threat throughout the entire show, where they never did well against him. And that's what I appreciate the most about it, is that Shredder is never really defeated, and if he, well, until, towards the end. But when he does suffer defeats, he kind of just goes and becomes more powerful and even bigger of a threat, and that is a really impressive thing. But yeah, honestly, I'm gonna just go through instead of season by season by the major threats of it. And this is kind of be from kind of my least favorite to my most favorite. And going to my least favorite is probably Lord Dreg, who is from the space season. Well, space like half season, and I honestly think that was the weakest because it's fully disconnected from everything, and you don't really have anyone besides a few appearances of the Krang connecting it to the main show, because everyone is on Earth in a parallel timeline at the time because they went back in time to save Earth. But with that, it is most interesting when they're going into that season after the stuff for the black hole generator. And everything with Dreg is just honestly kind of boring. He's definitely my least favorite part of it. And He could have done a lot better, but I think it was just added so they could have an extra antagonist fully unique to the space season. But going to the next one, it is the next weakest of those storylines is probably when they're trapped in the farm after their very major defeat in the end of season two. And the main problem with this is that it just kind of goes away from an interesting storyline and mainly focuses on just like kind of more pointless side stories than really big ones. Again, there are some awesome stories here, especially with Leo's recovery, which is definitely a highlight in it and pushes it above the stuff from space. And with this storyline, it is really interesting and well done. There's also some really fun ones. But yeah, honestly, that is pretty solid. Going to the next of the storyline slash threats between there's like three more or four more, but these two are pretty close. But honestly, I'd say that up next is the Triceratons and their storyline. And although I think that the storyline was interesting with them, they just fall slightly below it, below everything. Also, because I think everything else had some pretty cool stuff with them. But going through that storyline, they don't appear too much. They are pretty threatening when they do, and they do manage to destroy the Earth. But still, I think that it could be, a little better with them, and they could have been used a little more. Oh, and what I completely forgot because it is pretty minor is I didn't remember the guy's name, but he's like the demonic time traveler. He doesn't appear too much, but the storylines with him are pretty enjoyable. He appears for I think like 5 episodes, so can't say too much about him, but I'd say with what we had with him, it was pretty entertaining, so I'm not really counting him towards this. But he was a fun character, just didn't have too much of him. And to another of the kind of side storylines that aren't too related, there is the Raphael Mutant Apocalypse, which is like a dark timeline from what I could tell, and just what I wanted it to be because I feel like it'd be really disappointing if that's where this all went to, with the world nearly being destroyed. I think that that's just too dark of a future and seems to contradict some other stuff, so I'm assuming that is just a dark timeline and something that happened when the Krang lived instead of died in the what was the season 3 finale, which also was the season 4 like mid-season finale, since it was covered kind of the same events. But honestly, that one, although I thought it was good, I just really don't like it as a canonical ending. I just think it's a better as a dark ending. But moving on to some of the big stuff, we have a really great threat being everything from the 80s Turtles. And although these guys appeared just a few times, I feel like it was just so big and significant. I could, put it definitely over the Triceratons, and I think it's a little more significant than everything that happened with that. Again, I don't remember his name, the time traveling guy. That I could put him there since they were the antagonists of their own show. And although I did watch that show when I was younger, I haven't really seen it in such a long time, so I don't have the best connection to it, but it still has a special place to me, and it was really awesome to see not only Krang from that end, have that version of Krang connected to the new show, but also see all these other crazy things with the Shredder from that, and for this to be the series finale, I think that it definitely does go here, and it was really interesting, but for some weird reason, on the DVD which I watched this on, they didn't put this as the final episode and put like a lot of episodes after it in the DVD release order. But yeah, honestly, that's probably the third of the interesting threats. Obviously, I think you know what the first two are and those storylines. And honestly, the main reason I'm doing this is because I think there's so much. I just want to look at the storylines and everything related to these characters. But going to probably the second most interesting, definitely that's the Krang and everything related to them. The Krang were really great threats. They both started it off. It didn't start off since, it all began with the Shredder, but with the mutations and everything, they started it off. And they were the first threats the Turtles went up against. And honestly, I think that the Krang were really great. They had, kind of annoying way of talking for, most of them besides the subprime, which is voiced by the legendary late Gilbert Godfrey, which was truly amazing. But going to them, they were, as I said, just great antagonists. They were pretty interesting, and it was just really fun to watch them. And they always had some fun comedic moments. They had, some dark moments, but not as much as the next one, which is easily my favorite, and the storyline I want to talk about the most. But everything with the Krang was interesting. There's nothing really weak. And I'm just surprised they were kind of, killed off in the season 3 finale. And besides a few appearances in the past during season 4, before they went back to the present, we never saw the Krang again because they stuck with the deaths of Krang Prime and Subprime. And I think that's honestly something that's really unique about this, that they have death in it and it actually matters. Although if you are undone, they are eventually permanently killed off later on. And that all relates to my absolute favorite of these storylines and the absolute best part of this, which is everything relating to the Shredder. And as I mentioned earlier, the Shredders just began his time on the show destroying the Turtles. And in every fight, I think two exceptions, he was doing incredibly, with the exception of, his final fight when I'm talking about these. And that is one, or I can't remember the exact episode off the top of my head, but he is defeated by Splinter. Either that or was more of a draw, but I know it was, not great for him. And then the other one is in the season 4, sort of like, mid-season finale where they actually managed to defeat the Triceratons, where Splinter gives him a serious beating and actually puts him on life support. And I would say the best part about Shredder is he was a very serious threat. He completely crippled and injured Leonardo for the first, I'd say, just under half of season 3, where he spent it trying to recover from the brutal beating he got from the Shredder. That was really interesting to see, and I mentioned in the season when I was talking about that storyline earlier, that's what he recovered from. But everything with the Shredder, it was just so intriguing. Everything with Orokosaki was, as I said, it was just incredible. Probably my favorite episode of the entire show has to be the one where they go back in time and we get to see how Orokosaki and Hamano Yoshi broke apart and he became the Shredder. It was such an incredible episode, and I think it was just really well done. And honestly, of all the characters, Orokosaki and Hamano Yoshi, those are my favorites because I just loved Splinter and the Shredder because they were just so interesting and well done. But now going to everything else with the Shredder, him with Karai and tricking her after kidnapping her, although I think that was pretty predictable and it was going to be revealed, and it was obviously revealed at the end of the first season. I really liked the twist, and I think it was something different and unique to do. Going throughout it, the Shredder was just an extremely, insanely powerful threat, and although I don't love the look of the Super Shredder as much as the classic Shredder, it just put him up on another level, made him so much more dangerous, and gave him the ultimate his ultimate chance for revenge where he managed to kill Splinter, and that is for the final time because it was really happened once before, which is at the end of season 3, where he just showed how petty he was and killed Splinter before Splinter could save the Earth. And honestly, that's something else I want to talk about in a completely separate video about how petty the Shredder is and let the Earth be destroyed just so he could get revenge. But yeah, honestly, that was truly crazy. Everything else that happened with the Shredder was just so interesting, up to his final battle where he is killed by Leonardo. And although I do wish that we got to see a little more of that fight, I was just really blown away that they were fully willing to kill off characters in this. And even though he did come back in the fifth season, it was only briefly, and he didn't do too much because the real reason he was back was because of the demon, which the name I don't remember of, but he was played by Mark Hamill, was there and used him to become the ultimate power and try to take over the world. But the Shredder just was kind of there for that and threw the demon back into the underworld. But besides that, which I think, although it could have been cool to have him fight the turtles one last time, I just really loved the Shredder in this. He was done so incredibly, so well done, and as I said, he was my favorite part of it. But now that I've really looked at all the different storylines, oh, with one exception, I just realized I didn't talk about the one where they were in that other world with the rabbit and the pug, and that one, was it was fine. Not my favorite, but it was just a fun, kind of like different storyline. But now to talk about the turtles themselves and Splinter, because they were all really well done. Going to my favorite being Splinter, he was really well done, and even though he disappears for a good amount of the show, with him missing most of the first half of season 3, with the turtles believing he is dead, and then again the first half of season 4 for the most part, where he is dead, at least to them in their timeline, and is paralleled on Earth where he hasn't fully died yet. But that is just, another crazy thing to happen with Splinter of him dying a few times, although I do think it is really ultimately killed him off in the end because just always undoing deaths and not making it a real thing is kind of, a bad thing to do. But I really did enjoy Splinter in this, and it was really interesting to see him and just kind of how bad things got for him, but how he's always just there for his sons, and once he learned of her, his daughter, and even just there for April to help train her. And yeah, honestly, that was all just really nice and interesting, but honestly, I don't have too much to say about Splinter. I really did enjoy him, but they didn't do too much with him, but I still really love the character. My favorite of the turtles was Leonardo, who has done really well. You could definitely see how much leadership took its toll on him and how he was just kind of suffering through the entire thing and had to make some really hard decisions. I think, as I said, Leo did an amazing job and was played really well. And yeah, that's really all I have to say about him. Going to my next favorite is Raphael, and I can't believe he's played by Samwise Gamgee. It's just, so crazy and surprising because Raphael's just the opposite of Samwise Gamgee, and I just didn't even realize it until like halfway into the show where I paused the DVD so I could resume it tomorrow on the credits. And I saw Sean Astin, and I'm like, wait, he's here? And then I look and I'm like, oh my God, he's Raphael. I instantly figured out because I knew the voice sounded familiar, and I'm like, that's Sam, and that was just really crazy. But that was a really well done character. Of course, he is, the angry hothead guy, but I think he was still done really well. And then I'd say, like, everyone else is probably around the same level. I think that Casey, he is he's a good character, but not the best. Still, he is fun in the show and has his good moments. April is similar. She is really powerful and has some kind of crazy moments. But I think that she's, on the same level as, everyone else in terms of the characters. And then Donnie and Mikey are on the same level around of enjoyment for me. I think they're both done really well and fit their roles well. But they're just, I think, not as interesting or as well developed as the other characters. And both do have some flaws. Mikey could get kind of annoying at sometimes. And Donnie has his kind of creepy stalker-like obsession with April, which is, a pretty big problem for him. But really, besides that, these characters they're interesting, and again, a few other ones. Karai is interesting, and I really love her change in story. And I think it's interesting that they also gave everyone, kind of a romantic interest. But yeah, honestly, that's kind of it where I have things to say. At least, at least in terms of a review, because there's a few other things I want to look at specifically. But besides that, honestly, I really enjoyed the show. I had so much fun. Of course, I always had the best time with the Shredder, but I still enjoyed really everything else. I don't think it was, really bad at any point. Just at some points, it wasn't as good as other points. And those points are mainly when they were away from, New York City and the two biggest threats being Shredder or the Krang. But honestly, I want to know what you think. Please let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next episode of Legends and Theories. Thank you for watching this episode of Legends and Theories. Please subscribe, like the video, share the video, leave a comment, check out the video on screen, and may the Force be with you.